Behavior of North American Mammals by Elbrock and Reinhardt. It is the best. There's nothing even close. Where he takes all the major animals, mammals, and gives you a detailed chapter on their behavior, their mating, their habits. It's terrific. It's just great. And it's nationwide. But it's the best book there is on mammal behavior that I've ever found. So I just can not stop recommending that one. And Elbrock, I think, publishes by far the best. I know a lot of you go tracking in the winter with me. This is the best. There isn't anything as good. I think it's $50 now, but it's worth it. The illustrations and the photographs are wonderful. It's very, very detailed. Sometimes it goes over my head. He has all the measurements for every single possible gait of every animal. I mean, it's just amazingly detailed. He's probably the guru of tracking. Yeah. It's called Mammal Tracks and Sign: A Guide to North American Species. Now, if you're tracking out west, there's another book that I didn't think because you don't go out west that much, but that is better for the west. But this, if you're going to do everything, is the best book. It's worth the $50. It really is. I didn't bring all my bird books. I don't think there's much difference, to be honest with you, whether you do Sibley or whether you do Peterson or whether you do National Geographic Guide. They're all really good. I like Sibley, mostly because I think he does better with the multiple plumages as the bird matures than the other guides do. I also do Sibley because I actually got to work with Sibley for about 5 years. So, I had a personal relationship with the guy. So, of course, I use his book. And I didn't put this in the bibliography, but I got a new book. What's It Like to Be a Bird? David Sibley. Brand new, published, I think, 2 months ago, maybe. And wonderfully illustrated. And at first, when I opened it, I was really disappointed and said, gee, I want a coffee table book. I never buy coffee table books. And then I started reading it. And it's a coffee table book in the sense that you've got these wonderful illustrations, but tremendous amount of information in a very easy to absorb style. I have technical bird books that I go to once in a while, but this is really good. I'm really pleased with it now that I've spent some time with it. So I would strongly recommend this. It's not on the list. What It's Like to Be a Bird by David Sibley. And I'm just going to read one little quickie here. Chickadees. So he's got 3 different note sections on chickadees, and he's got 3 different kinds of chickadees that he's illustrated. And in one of these sections, he says, chickadees that live in areas with harsh winters are very diligent about storing food for the winter. And a single chickadee can store up to 1,000 seeds in a day, or 80,000 in a season. This strategy is called scatter hoarding, as birds simply tuck food away in any crevice where it'll fit, in clusters of spruce needles and bark crevices and so on. Incredibly, the bird can remember where each item is stored, and at least some information about which ones are the best quality and which ones have been eaten already. The hippocampus, the part of the brain involved in spatial memory, is larger in birds that live in cold climates where storing food is more important. It grows larger in the fall to accumulate multiple storage locations and then shrinks again in the spring. So, got a lot of information here, but it's well presented. It's interesting because when I talked to David once, I said, so you're an ornithologist? He said, no, I'm not. So my father was an ornithologist. He says, I'm an artist. I draw birds. But obviously, he's absorbed huge amounts of information. All right. So now we're going to get to the other part of the bibliography, and I'm just going to go to some of my books that I decided I would pick out just because I think they're kind of special in their own way. I think you can still get this. A lot of books, of course, you can get on Amazon as you use them. Or you can go to the Brixton bookstore, and that guy will get you most anything. A Guide to Nature in Winter by Stokes. Stokes did birding for a long time. Their bird guides were photographic, and they were not drawn images. I don't like the photographic guides because a photograph of a bird is just that, a photograph of a bird. And there's variation in birds. You know, like if you look at song sparrows, 10 song sparrows don't look alike. So when you take a photograph, it's not as good as an artist who tries to put together a composite. But this was one of the first books I started with when I was trying to learn this stuff, I don't know, 45 years ago. And, you know, I would fill my pack with books and go out in the woods. And this was one of the first books that was in my pack because I was doing it in the winter time. And then I would go home and, you know, read and look it up. So I guess I just fell in love with the book because it sort of awakened me to all the things in the winter that I had just been walking by and just ignoring and didn't know what the hell it was. Donald Stokes is also a guy I got to know a little bit because I had his daughter in my class.
Kevin?
Yeah.
Okay, just to say something very quick.
Sure.
This is not the book I brought, but I started in the last minute because I love that book, but I also love his other book, which is A Guide to Animal Tracking and Behavior. And it's similarly the same kind of reasons you just described.
And he's got a 3-volume set separate on bird behavior. So he's really a birder. And for a while he had a birding thing on television with his wife, Lillian. And they did it kind of seasons. But yeah, he knows his stuff. It's interesting, when I first started tracking, I was starting in the woods around Concord, Massachusetts. And this is just a side story. I found this set of tracks, and you know, I measured them, photographed them, and you know. So his daughter was in my class, so I gave her the photographs and said, "Go home and ask your dad what this is." And he sent back a message, and he said, "Well, it's a fisher, but you couldn't have seen it in Concord, Massachusetts, because there are no fishers in Concord, Massachusetts." Well, he was wrong about that. Fishers had, you know, back. He didn't realize it. But he was a nice guy. Asian shrubs, the big one. I got 2 books. This is fairly new. We brought this as one of her favorites. There's all kinds of books to help you identify things in the plant kingdom. And they sort of fall into 2 categories. One are the key guides. Newcomb's is maybe the one that a lot of people use. And then there's the more simple guides for people like me that color code everything. So white flowers, yellow flowers, pink flowers. It's not as scientific and maybe not as efficient, but I like that system. If you like the key guides, this is probably not the way to go. You probably want to go to Newcomb. And you know, Dennis Smith is just a whiz with Newcomb. I mean, he can fly through that book and find a flower. So, you know, it depends on whether you like key guides or whether you don't. But if you don't, I think this is a really good one. The other one I go back to over and over and over is Dwelly, Carolyn Dwelly. She has a whole series of books on trees and shrubs and on wildflowers. It's illustrated. She tends to give you a little bit more information. When I was working with the docents, I always said, don't identify it and point it to somebody unless you can tell me a story about it. If you're going to say that's plantain and then walk over to the next plant, don't do it. Because in 5 steps, you're going to forget what that is. It's just the names and green thing on the ground. Tell me a story about plantain. It's white man's foot. It's the plant that the Indians used to tell how far the settlers had come, because they kept dropping the seeds all the time. So they knew if the white men had been there. Now you remember plantain. Well, he puts a little bit of that in her book. The more of that you can get, the better chance you have of remembering.
Kevin, the first plant book you showed us, which one was that on the list? I couldn't see the cover from here.
Well, one?
No, the other one.
The other one is Wildflowers of New England, and this is put out by the New England Wildflower Association.
Is that by Elliman?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Lee, I'm going to call on you. You asked me to include a beginner's guide recognizing trees of the Northeast.
Yes.
You don't have that with you.
No.
Tell me why it's a good book.
It's a good book because it breaks things down. It takes, for instance, the maple trees and breaks them down right beside each other so you can see the similarities and the differences. And it does that for any number of trees. And just very simple to understand, very easy.
So that's Lee's recommendation. It's a book I got to get.
Yep. Yep.
You guys use these?
Mm-hmm.
Finder guides? I think they're good. You know, they don't have all the trees. They're not all inclusive. But it's a great place to get started. You know, if you're stuck on something that, you know, like I can never remember the bloody fern. I just can't. So I think I start with this because, and these are key, but they're very simple. It's just sort of a very good place to start. And they're cheap. And they don't, you know, I think there's a dozen different ones. All kinds. Yes. Yes. There's only one book I know of that's worth owning on Maine amphibians and reptiles, and it's this book, and it's still in print. And it also has a CD, so you can listen to the sound. And
what's the title, Kevin?
It's Amphibians and Reptiles, Maine Amphibians and Reptiles. What it lacks is really good drawings sometimes. Some of them are okay, and some of them aren't great. And then none of them are in color. It's really good range maps, which is very important with amphibians and reptiles, particularly when you start working your way north. But it's the only one I know of. It's got one color section. I wish they just had more color in the book, but it's the only one I know of that's very good for amphibians and reptiles. Tracking. I don't know how many tracking books I have. Doesn't maybe. And every time I go to the bookstore, somebody's published another one, so I got to buy it. The Old Rock book is the best, the one I showed you, but I think everybody should own this one by Paul Resendez. When this started to be, when tracking started to become popular, this guy, a little older than me, he might be dead now, and nobody had written a book about tracking with photographs. All the books that had been written about tracking had little diagrams, and they weren't that good. And this guy was not a tracker. This guy was a photographer. But he sort of recognized there was this niche. And he was and he went to work and did a tremendous job photographing the tracks. And it's a great book. Interestingly enough, he went to the original this Camden House to get it published. And they bought the idea and said, well, write a chapter. Paul's not an educated man. He can't write. So he wrote out a chapter. And they said, well, this isn't going to work. You know, there's nouns and verbs and adjectives. And he just couldn't write. So they sent him a ghostwriter. And he sat down and he did the book orally, and the ghostwriter wrote the book. I don't know how often that happens, but it's still available, mostly in paper. I haven't seen it hardbound in a long time, but it's a great book. And then, of course, a lot of you know about David Brown's track cards. And, you know, the beauty of these is, you know, you can throw them down in the ground, even in the winter, and put them right next to the track. I mean, that's a real, and that was David's image of what a tracking guide should be. It's interesting. The story with this is interesting. David is an English teacher by profession, and so he certainly can write. And publish it because nobody would publish the card. They said, no, we don't do that. You know, we publish a book and it gets put in the slot in Barnes and Noble. And if you've got a book and something that goes with the book, like track cards, they won't put it on the shelf because it'll get lost and get confused. No, we don't publish that. So it took him a long time to get somebody. He was self-publishing the book for I don't know how many years. And then he finally found a publisher who was a terrible publisher. And this is very, very poorly distributed. So they're hard to get. You can buy them directly. Or you can call David and he'll try to get you one. The way he did this is, to me, really interesting. He had photographed tracks, the old-fashioned way of film, for maybe a decade, maybe longer. And in every single track, he put a penny. And then when he was going to do this, he projected the track up on that wall until he got the penny to the exact size. And then would put paper up and trace the track. And he did it over and over and over and over until he got this. So, tremendous amount of work. Well, I think, for what I don't think there's anything this good for actually putting it down next to the track. And none of it is made up. You can tell some of the track books have made it up or stolen because, the famous one is Porcupine. There's the wrong number of toes because it's a mistake. It's a transfer from tracker to tracker to tracker to tracker. They stole it from the information. So if you see a porcupine print with the wrong number of toes, you know that they didn't come up with it. What I like, and I don't think you can get it anymore. You might be able to get it used from the Bridgeton Bookstore by Amazon. It's called The Field Guide Tracking Animals in the Snow. And it's by a woman by the name of Louise Forrest. And when I was tracking in the snow, I found this to be invaluable. Mostly because her measurements, I thought, were by far the best. And she had a system in the front of the book that I found just really easy to understand and come to grips with. But it's strictly for snow tracking. So I don't use it anymore because in Sedona, we don't do snow tracking anymore. We do dust tracking. It's a whole different deal. Snow tracking is a lot more. All right. I get a few more things I'm going to hold up, and then I want to find out what you brought. Birds. Bird watching in Maine. This is a guide to where to go to find a bird, and it's by a guy called Derek Lovell. He runs the birding store in Freeport, Maine. You may have met him. You may have gone down to that. It's sort of like on the way to Beans. And it's on the right-hand side of the road. It used to be a Comfort Inn he was next to. And he does field trips, and they're really, really good. Unfortunately, they all tend to be down there. He does one field trip in Freiburg a year. He really knows his stuff. He's really, really good. And so for our region, there's a map, and there are all the places around us, the wording, and then what you find in those places at different seasons. So this guy's done it. He's gone to every one of these places. And I quiz him. And he knows. I asked him, for instance, about Brownfield Lawn. One of the places I go to is strange. But it's the only place where my dog won't get out of the car with the bugs. I went there to spring bird. There was no bugs. There were no bugs. And it's been didn't see a bug. I don't know what happened. You can go on his website and you can sign up for field trips. If you like to drink beer and you go in that area, it's called Birding and Brew. So you leave in a bus and you go and you watch birds for a little while, and then he takes you to someplace where they brew beer, and you drink beer for a little while. Then you go back on the bus and you go see more birds. By the end of the day, you don't care about the birds. You see, I've never done it because I can't figure out how I never drive home. But, good guy knows a lot about birds. One last thing I want to hold up. There are, if you go into the Barnes and Noble or any bookstore, there are endless numbers of books on, you know, since all that stuff came on television, you know, Dual Survivor, and I don't know, Les Stroud, it just became huge genre. And in the bookstore, it became huge. So there'd be 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 survival guides. I picked this one because it's small, it zips up, and you can actually take it with you if you want to. And when I read it, I thought, that's all I need. If you read a survival guide and it talks about hunting the animals to feed yourself, that's throw it. It's just nonsense. You're not lost in it. You're not going to stop. I do have a story. I had a friend in Montana who was hired by the TV series Dual Survivor. Anybody ever watch that one?
Is that dual like 2 survivors or
Two guys
dual like
out in the woods. And supposedly they go out in the woods and they get themselves in this predicament. And they're going to have to, you know, stay overnight. And how are they going to survive? What are they going to eat? Where are they going to sleep? How are they going to keep warm and all that nonsense? So he was hired as a consultant because they were doing it in Montana. And these guys aren't from Montana, so they don't know any of the plants or what they can eat or what they can't eat or any of that stuff. So I said, well, what was it like? He said, well, first of all, there's about 30 people in the filming crew. So these guys are never alone in the woods. He said, you know, there's like 5 cameras and guys with sound booms. And he said, you know, it's just this huge production. And he said, nobody is ever inconvenienced. Nobody ever sleeps overnight anywhere except in a really nice hotel. He said, it's just all make-believe. He said, they just make it up. He said, they never are cold. They're never hungry. You know, he said, it's just total make-believe. So, I don't know. I don't know if any of this stuff is all make-believe. So, I think that's all I want to say about these books right now. I want to say one more thing about apps, and then I want to hear from you in the books that you might have brought and that you like. I never use it as a phone. Nobody has my phone number. The only person that has my phone number is my wife. It's great. It never rings. It's the best phone in the world. But I use it all the time as a GPS, as a birding app, as a tracking app, as a wildflower app. I used to have, and when I started, I would have a pack that weighed 15 pounds. It was all booked. And I go out in the woods with books. Now I go out in the woods. Yeah. Are the apps as good as the books? No. But the trade-off is I only have to have this. And a lot of the times, this is all I need. So I put down some of the apps. The birding app, iBird Pro, is better than any bird book you'll buy. It has all the information in the bird book, and you can listen to the song. So you can't get better book. And if you're any place where you can get online, you can instantly, the app is designed so you can instantly go online and get any other information about the book that you can possibly think of, about the bird. So the app is I asked David Sibley about the app because he's got an app. I just happen to like this one better. And he said, that's where all the money is. He said, you can't make any money writing books. Now, that's not true. He makes $3.75 for every field guide he sells. The first field guide sold 5 million copies. Multiply that times $3.75. He's doing okay. But but he said, you want to make real money? Publish an app. And he said the other thing about the app, he said the book publishers only let you write a new book in terms of identification guides once a decade. That's all they'll do. He said the app, I upgrade the map monthly with new information or changes or new illustrations. He said, so try it out. And the app costs $15. You can't lose. I like iBird Pro better than Sibley's because iBird Pro has a feature where if you get on a bird and you're not sure, you can press a button and it says similar species. And it'll take you to all the lookalikes. And it will also take you to the birds that sound alike. I don't hear with beans. This works because new hearing aids with these birding apps, the noise goes from here to my hearing directly. So I hear it. I heard birds that I hadn't heard in decades because now I can get it directly from the app. The other thing is it's much more ethical, particularly in the spring when you're trying to identify warblers. You're really not supposed to call in the bird. I know people do it all the time. By playing the bird song and then the warbler will come to you, the male, because it's the males that sing, because you're really interrupting the breeding process. You know, if it's a yellow warbler and you play a song because you can't see it, and he comes to you, he thinks you're a yellow warbler, and he'll spend part of his day then looking for you because you're intervening in his territory. But I can play the songs directly to my hearing aids, and they don't hear it. So it's just a huge leap forward. The technology just is stupendous.
Kevin?
Yeah.
Does it identify the bird by just song?
No.
You can record the song. Is there a good app for that? I have heard Genie do it.
There is no, that I found, there is no good app that does it by song yet. Sibley published one 2 years ago called Song Sleuth. I've used it for 2 years. I can't make it work. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I go to a bird that I absolutely am sure of without any question, and the app gets it wrong. So I haven't found one that can listen to the bird and tell you what the bird is. Song Sleuth, was published with a lot of fanfare. This was the app that was finally going to do it. It doesn't work.
I've got Song Sleuth.
Excuse me?
I've got Song Sleuth, and I've been trying it. It tells me that absolutely everywhere in my 300 acres of woods is nothing but marsh wrens.
It gets easily confused, and it only works with iTrack Pro, excellent, really good app. So if you have iTrack Pro and David's track cards and you're in the woods, you should be able to do everything with tracks. New England Wildflowers has an app, 3,591. Most of these apps for plant identification are keys, pretty simple keys. You start with where you are, and then you go to color, and then you go to the number of leaves. Pretty basic stuff. Maybe the arrangement of leaves. Is it a basal arrangement? Are they alternate? Are they paired? I have mixed luck with the plant identification apps. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I don't like Leaf Snap. I've never been able to make that one work with beans. Maybe some of you can make it work. I don't know. The good part about the apps is they're cheap. If you only have to spend $15 if it doesn't work that well, there are a lot of GPS apps. So if you don't have GPS, put a GPS app on your phone, learn how to use it, and then you'll have no excuse for ever being lost. I use GPS Motion. GPS Motion X is the one I use. The biggest problem with these apps here is to put the map in your phone. It's gonna have cell service, and you know as well as I do, the main cell services for beans. It's interesting because out west, it's cell service everywhere. I haven't been anywhere out west, anywhere, deep into the bowels of a canyon. I have cell service. Maine, top of a mountain sometimes. I don't have cell service. So It doesn't work that well. All right. Who brought a book?
I got lost of there in the car. Can I go get them?
Yeah.
Can you give me a second to
Sure.
do that?
Who else brought a book? What you got?
I got a couple, Kevin. You talked a little earlier about the narrative of a plantain. In other words, don't just point out a plant,
Right.
put a narrative behind it. So I think there's a fascinating sort of human history of this area. And, you know, you can build a narrative around anything, but some of the human history, like Lovell's Town, for example, or even the Scalp Hunters, which gives a very interesting narrative of the Native American experience, provides a sort of other context, more of a human context. And it's not, maybe it's a little off topic with the Land Trust's mission, but it's also gives a little bit of an adventurous human context experience to it. So I like these two books there. This one's a little sensationalist, but it's not bad. They're both factual, and they give you a little more context, a little bit to, you know, what's going on behind the stone walls, what's going on behind the old course of the Saco, what are these pictograms or petroglyphs at the north end of Kiesel Lake. You know, I didn't know there was a major Native American village where the Freiburg Fairgrounds.
Yeah.
You know, so you can pick stuff up from these, and it just gives you a little more context.
They're both in the library.
Yeah.
When the library's open.
It's open. It is open.
What you got?
This is Donald Kruzma, Bird Song by the Seasons.
Oh, I don't know that book.
It comes with 2 CDs. I found it remaindered at the bookstore in North Conway for $9. I haven't listened to the CDs yet because I actually don't have a CD player. I've just ordered one for $25 from Amazon so that I can listen. But because birdsong, the sort of technical side of birdsong is something that I've taught and know about, and this is very nice because it brings it together with the birds we have. He's largely in New England. He lives somewhere near Quabbin.
Can you look at a sonogram and make sense of it?
Oh yeah,
Oh, see, I can't work that stuff out.
that's a cedar waxwing sonogram, for example. And you can see on the sonogram it's using it 2 separate sides of its syrinx, you know. So I think it's a very cool book, and it's organized by month, and he selects 2 birds per month to talk about. And then there's a sort of short chapter on each bird. So for example, now in July, it's the dawn and day songs of scarlet tanagers is 1 chapter, and the yearling indigo buntings were learning the local micro dialect is the 2nd chapter.
I got a story, true story.
It's cool.
I was with David Sibley. We birded the whole day. Been out for 8 hours with really good birds, 24 birds. You know, I'm the driver in these trips. I drive the van because I knew all the dirt road systems. So I'm driving them around all day. We're sitting on the porch having a beer. And I said to David, so, I had 80 species on my list for the day. I said, what was the best bird you saw today, David? He said, white-crowned sparrow. I said, white-crowned sparrow? You must have seen 500 white-crowned sparrows. He said, yeah, but the one we saw this morning by the barn was singing a Colorado dialect.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. They're famous for their dialect.
It's like, how can you know that?
Now, I also mentioned one app, which is not on your list, but I have found to be good, called Plant Snap.
Say it again?
Plant Snap. You have Leaf Snap.
Plant Snap, yeah.
Plant Snap. And you give it a photograph, ideally that shows a flower and includes the leaves in the shot as well. And I found it works extremely well on both sides of the Atlantic.
Wow.
With wildflowers and garden plants.
Plant Snap.
Yeah, I use that app. It's pretty good.
So I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's my experience.
You guys got books? You got a book?
Yep.
What you got? Vernal Pools. That's a really good book. That's a really good book. And is that one spiral bound?
It's a field guide to the animals of the farm.
Yeah. Then it's got a spiral binding so you can lay it open. And it won't get wrecked very easy because when you're looking at those, you're always near the water. But I've got that book, and it's a really good one. What else we got?
It's freshwater fish of the Northeast.
See, I go fishing and I don't catch many fish, so I never have to identify. So we good? Does it have good images?
Yep.
Oh yeah, that's great. And a third one? I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
That's Ellie.
Ellie, what you got? Ellie, Nature Anatomy. I don't know that book. Tell me about it.
It's like a book. It has like a little bit of everything in it. So it has like a chapter on like just animals and birds, plants.
And you like it? Okay. What you got?
Well, as a beekeeper, I thought this one was interesting, and it is scientific, following the wild bees by Thomas Seeley, and it is scientific, but it's interesting that there are so many other bees in the environment other than honeybees, and it's interesting to follow them and check out their habitat. So that is pretty scientific. Trees of Power, and the Organic Grower's Guide to Planting, Propagation, Culture, and Ecology. This is a Canadian author, Akiva Silver, and it's a phenomenal book. It takes all of the trees very scientifically, but it breaks it down. It'll talk about one species of trees. For instance, when I was planting my chestnut sapling, it was invaluable because it told me the best soil for them, the best place to put them, that sort of thing. So it's a little different, but it does expand on the trees. Of course, has all the natural, naturally would have all these tree ID things. Another one I like to refer to is Plant Identification Terminology, and that's by James and Melinda Harris, second edition. Lots of great drawings and talks about the, it's just basically a glossary. It's just a good resource for all your plants. Songbirds I found really interesting, and I'm not sure where I got it or how long I've had it, but it was a great resource as well. So that one is by Noble Proctor. He's a PhD. In case that interested. And this one I found incredibly useful. I didn't know that I ever would. This is America's Other Audubon, Joy Kaiser. And what she's done is she has all these plates for the nests and the eggs, and they're all hand drawn. I mean, there's beautiful, beautiful detail, and with measurements and everything. So, I mean, they're all almost suitable for framing, actually. And I found a bird nest when we were snowshoeing this past winter on the snowshoe trail that we were on, and I had to move it because otherwise it was going to get trampled. And I looked at it and keyed it out, and I was actually able to identify it using this book. You know, I used other books just to double check, but this is just, if you look through these photos, are just absolutely, absolutely stunning. I mean, you can't mistake them. So,
Sorry,
anyway,
what was that one called?
So that's what I have here. And then in the book, in those who like to read nature-oriented things that aren't quite so scientific, there's some books in here. Of course, the one, Invention of Nature by Andrea Wolf, and then her garden, Founding Gardeners, again by Andrea Wolf. So not necessarily just reference books, but, you know, just fun reading and somewhat scientific as well. So there are a couple of those in there as well. If anybody wants to look through those.
Could you just tell us again the name of the one with, yes, that one.
This one, America's Other Audubon, and her name is Joy Kaiser, K-I-S-E-R. Thank you.
I know I'm going over. Can I do two more things?
May I interrupt first for a nature distraction moment? If you listen carefully, you'll hear a cuckoo in the background.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Very good.
Been hearing them a lot this summer.
Yeah.
Bird books. There are the conservative estimate, 40 million birders in the United States. So publishers just endlessly publish new bird books because they sell. You got 40 million people who will buy it. So that's why there's so many. Every time you go to the store, there's a new bird book. They did a study in Arizona, and birders leave behind when they travel more money and cause less problem than any other group of tourists. So, you know, I have friends that have opened now B&Bs that are for birders only. Because he said, they're great. They come home, they go to sleep right away, they get out early, I can clean the room, they never make a mess, and they never get drunk. He said they're the ideal gift. I got two more things I want to say. I didn't hold this one up originally because this is if you are interested in learning land navigation and not so much GPS, this is the best, without any question, book on map and compass. There's no better book. I don't know how available it is anymore. Cliff Jacobson is the author. I once took a mini course with him. Guy's really good. This book, if you want to do the map and compass. And the other author I didn't
What's
mention,
the title, Kevin?
it's just called Map and Compass.
Oh, okay.
Is R.D. Lawrence. He's dead. He's an Ontario biologist who published, I don't know, 20 books. And when I was younger, I started reading him. I read every single book he read. The one I've used over and over, and I go back and I read them over and over again. There's Patty when I did the Beaver Talk. I think I read that one 3 times. When I was a young man and got involved in this and started reading his books, I just, couldn't wait for the next one to be published. So I wrote him a little letter and just thanked him for his book. And one day the phone rang, and it was R.D. Lawrence. And I said, I can't believe you called me. He said, I can't write letters to everybody. I can sit down and, do 20 phone calls. I call every single person who writes, and I just I'm blown away by that. But if you just like to read stories, narratives about nature, and he does wolves and bears and porcupines and beavers and charismatic megafauna. But he is a trained biologist and has a tremendous story. Just wonderful books to read, and some of them I've read 4 times. I went over my time, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Kevin. We don't mind.
Now I will listen to other people.
No, jump up and down.
I'll stand up and stretch break. I can't get my phone to stop. Audra, where are you? I can't get this. I'm still filming.
The Latin names for plants that you see in your books. I think that most people, and jump up and down if you can't hear me because I have a tendency to talk quietly. Most people see those words in their books or hear about them and they just are mystified by them. They don't read Latin, they don't know what they mean, they're just kind of annoying. They don't see any reason to learn them. So what I am going to try to do today is demystify that for you a little bit, make it a little more accessible, encourage you to try to learn some of them, or at least to find out what they mean. And also, when we get to the handout, to show you that you know more than you think you do already. You know a lot of the words and what they mean. I might be stating the obvious here, so forgive me if I am, but the Latin is not a translation of the English words that are there. The Latin is the scientific name that is used all over the world for that plant. So obviously plants have different names in different languages, and this is a way that botanists can communicate because they all use the same scientific terminology for it. We also, within the same country, you can have more than one name for the same plant. So this is a way to know that you're talking about the same one. I'll give you a little story. One of the first plants I learned when I started hanging out with all of you people was bellwort. And I think Lee pointed it out to me early in the spring, and I went home and I drew a picture of it like I'm supposed to, and I labeled it and I read about it, and I thought, I have this one down. I know bellwort. And then I was out in the woods, I guess the next year, and someone was talking about the wild oats. And I thought, God, that looks just like bellwort. And I thought, well, I guess I just don't understand the nuances of this distinction here. So I didn't say anything, and I looked at my bellwort again when I went home, and this kept happening. And so finally, this year, I don't know if you remember, Pam, I said to you in the woods one day, could you tell me how to distinguish, like, how is this different from bellwort and wild oats? And she just looked at me like I was an idiot and said, it's the same thing. So that, that is one reason to know what the scientific name is. But the most important reason, and this is really why I'm going to talk about this today, is that, just as Kevin was saying with the plantain, if you know something else about the plant, you're going to remember it better. And the scientific name is going to tell you things such as where the plant grows, whether geographically or what habitat it likes. It might tell you what color it is. It might tell you what shape the leaves are. It might tell you if it's hairy or smooth, things like that. So it's very useful, and it does, as I say, the more information you have about something, the better you can remember what it is. You can interrupt me at any point for any questions. So basically, to deepen your understanding of the plant itself, rather than just to know the fancy name for it. Now, why is it in Latin? Well, the system was developed by a guy named Carl Linnaeus, who was a Swedish botanist and zoologist in the 18th century. He classified plants, and he chose Latin because at that time, most educated people could read Latin, and he wanted as many people as possible to be able to, he could share his work with as many people as possible. The other reason that it's very useful that it's in Latin is that Latin is a dead language. Unlike languages, modern languages, which change all the time, we have new words, new coinages, we have new ways of using old words, nouns turn into verbs. Every time you turn around, you have slang. This isn't going to happen with a dead language. So this is static, and these terms are always going to be the same. So what Linnaeus did was, he's sometimes referred to as the father of taxonomy. So he's got all these classifications, these different classes of plants, from the tallest one, 7 or 8 classifications. The tallest one would just be it's a plant. And he brings it all the way down to the last 2, which are the genus and the species. And that's what we're going to talk about. Genus, think of the word general. Your genus is just your group, it's your general group. And your species is going to get specific about that group. So you can have, just as you can have hundreds and hundreds of plants, or thousands of plants, even in a family, you can have many, many, many plants, less than thousands, but you could have many plants in that general group, that genus, plural genera, not genuses. And you have to distinguish them somehow. It's kind of like people's names. In both cases, it's a binomial system, which means it has 2 names. But we have 2 names too. We have a given name, and we have our family name and our given name. So you need to specify, take for instance the cats. Cats is the genus. Those are the catses. But they're not exactly the same. So you have to just, if you're going to meet them, you couldn't just say, oh, I'd like you to meet my friend Cats. You have to specify which kind it is. There's the Pam kind, there's the Bob kind. So it's like that with plants. You have to learn. The whole thing goes together. It's just in the reverse order. It's as if you were saying, oh, I'd like you to meet my friend Cat's Pam, instead of Pam Cat. But it's the same thing. It's the same binomial system. So let's take a look at the color handout for a second that I gave you. The pictures on it. So what you have here, does everybody have that picture? Trillium at the top of the page. That's your genus. There are lots of different kinds of trilliums. They belong to there's a group of trilliums. As you can see, the one below it is also a trillium. The word that comes after it is the species. So it's going to identify something about that group, that group of trilliums. This one's going to tell you that it has large flowers. And then below, Trillium undulatum, is going to tell you that it's got wavy petals. And so otherwise, you might just say, well, that's a trillium. The common names don't always, sometimes they give us information, but they don't usually give us as good information as the Latin does. That other word that you see there, Melanthiaceae, that's the family that it belongs to. And in your books, you'll always see the genus and the species in italics. The genus is going to be capped like this. Your species is going to be lowercase. And then your family is always going to be in Roman type, not italicized, with a capital letter. The two parts, the first part is a noun. You remember from school, your noun is person, place, or thing. So this is a thing, a plant. And then it's modified by the adjective that comes after. And so you don't actually have to worry about this, but if you learn the roots, you're going to start noticing them. You'll see sometimes that the endings are different from species to species. This is just because the adjective has to agree with the noun, so we don't have to have a whole Latin lesson here, but Latin is one of those languages that has genders. So sometimes you're going to see, you might see the word alba, which is my first word on the list that we have. And then another plant you might see that is albus. It just means whether it's masculine or feminine, the noun. But don't worry about that. You will get the gist of it just from the root word. Okay. So you want to take a look at the handout that has all the Latin words on it. Oops. And this is designed to show you that you really actually know a lot of this stuff. What I did here was I put the Latin word. These are ones that come up frequently in the scientific terminology. Told you what it means, and I gave you an English word that is related to that word. In most cases, I'm basically concentrating on the species here rather than the group. You could also learn, it's good to learn the names of the groups too, but the species is the thing that's going to give you the characteristic about the plant. So that's what I focused on here. So the first one is albus, as I said, which means white or a grayish white in Latin, and we have English words, albino, albumin, the egg white comes from that word. You should speak up if you know any plants, the names of any plants that have some of these in them. You probably do. In the first case, I'm going to tell you the two spirea that you probably know. One is steeplebush, and one is meadowsweet. You may know more than two, but probably you know those plants. If I tell you that one is alba, spirea alba, and one is spirea tomentosa, which means densely matted, like you could imagine all these fibers close together, which one do you think is the meadowsweet? The alba or the tomentosa? The alba, exactly. It's the light colored one, right. So, if you said, well, I know that's a spirea, you have to say which spirea it is. The next one is arvalis or arvensa. You see that a lot in plants because this has to do with a cultivated field. So the one that I always think of is the rabbit's foot clover. And because I know that it's Trifolium arvensa, I remember that it is high in nitrogen, and that's why people plant it in cultivated fields. So getting back to Kevin's point here, if you know something that's seemingly unrelated, it's going to help you remember something about that plant. So I think I will always remember that that's the rabbit's foot clover. Aureus, the next one, is a golden or orange. It appears in the Latin name for orange hawkweed, which is Hieracium aurantiacum. Borealis, you know this word because you know about the aurora borealis, the northern lights. Often the species is going to give you geographic information. So this one's going to tell you that this plant grows in the north. Erectus means erect. The English word I chose is erect. The Trillium erectum. Do you know what the Trillium erectum is? which one it would be. It's the one that stands up the straightest. The flowers aren't all wavy and everything. It's the red trillium. Then we have erythros, which is actually the Greek word for red. Below we have rubrum, which is going to show up more often, I think. It's the Latin for red, but erythros, like erythrocyte, red blood cell. You'll see that often. You'll also see floss or floris. Words that come from floss, floris, flora, grandifloria. Didn't we have that? Yeah, the trillium grandiflorum. That's large flower. Folios, this is a really important one because obviously one of the things the species terminology does often is describes the leaves. So you might get something that's grandifolia, you might get something that's latifolia, you'll see it a lot, and it always means a leaf, or leaf-like. The clovers are called trifolium because the leaves have 3 lobes. Then we have glaber, which you often see to describe the plant. Plants are often described as being, in the plant books, as smooth or hairy. The smooth ones are going to be glaber. The English word for that is glabrous. So what I think of is the sumac. There's a sumac that's really hairy. There's a sumac that's smooth. So the smooth one's going to be Rhus glabra. You want the staghorn sumac. That's a really hairy one. It's Rhus hirta. Hirta you can see on this list as well, meaning hairy. The black-eyed Susan is called the Rudbeckia hirta because it's very hairy looking as well. The Rudbeckia part is just the name of somebody who's actually Linnaeus' mentor. Then we have Magnus. We're going to see that a lot. It's large as well. Maritinus, maritime. Micros, lesser. Montanus is going to have to do with mountains. Again, this is going to be a geographic detail or academic detail. Pendulous, think about a pendulum, it means hanging. Now, per is really important. It's going to come up a lot. It means through. I think many of you may know the terminology perfoliate as opposed to sessile. Do you know if you see a plant and you say, oh, that's perfoliate, what we're talking about? It means that the stem goes through the leaf. It's perfoliate. You see that quite often. Bone set, for example. The Latin name is Vitorium foliatum. So remember how the leaves look on bone set? The stem going right up through the middle of it. Poly means many, think polygamy. Primus, first or foremost. Pubescens, something that's ripening. Purpurius, sometimes it tells you the color. The color purple. Reptilis. These are plants that are like the white clover. White clover is trifolium reptilis. You see it grows in colonies and it creeps all over the place. So that's that one. The other one that I think that's reptans that you know is the trailing arbutus, and again, it's along the floor of the woods. It's an Epigea. Red, like red maple. Sagittatus. Think about Sagittarius. Sagittarius is archer. So Sagittatus means like an arrow. The arrow-leaf terthum is a polygonum sagittatum. Those little sharp arrows. Sessilis. This is a word that you know. I always hear people using the word sessile, saying, "Oh, that plant is sessile." It comes from a Latin word which means to sit. And what you have here is the leaf just sitting on the stalk, as opposed to having a petiole or it being foliata. Stellatas having to do with the star, but the starry part called Solomon's Hill is a plant stellata. Tortoise means twisted. Tri, of course you know tri means three. You're going to see that all over the place, carpelium, trillium. Unus meaning one. Uva. Uva is a grape. Think about, that little organ at the back of your throat, uvula, that is like a little grape. That's called that. Often you see things described as uvularia. Viridis, meaning fresh or green, with the hellebore, meaning hellebores, Helleboris, viridis, and vulgaris, which now has a really negative connotation, but actually really just means common. Something you see a lot. So the daisy, for instance. This is an example of where the common name really doesn't give you much information. It's just, what's a daisy? It doesn't really tell you anything. But the Latin name is a Leucanthemum vulgare, which means it's a white flower that's common. Now, of course, there's a million white flowers that are common, but that one describes the daisy. So those are just some of the words that I think you would come across if you did take the time to find out what they mean. At the bottom of the page here, I listed 3 different bellworts, since that's the plant that I had trouble distinguishing from the, what was the other one called? Wild oats or Mary bells or something like that. There's a bunch of names for it. So which one it's called a uvularia because the flower hangs down like a little grape. Can you tell what the difference is between the one that's perfoliata, the one that's sessilifolia, and the one that's grandifloria? How would you describe those 3? Lee?
I was looking around to see what everybody else was going to say.
Well, what do you know about the one that's sessilifolia? They sit, actually. They don't necessarily clasp, but they sit right on. There's no stem attached. They just sit right on the stalk. Right. And the perfoliata, per meaning through, literally means through the leaf. That is the one where the stem goes through the leaf. And grandiflora is like your picture of your Trillium grandiflorum here. It just means large flower. It's the big white one that is, I believe, the provincial flower of Ontario, to be my provincial flower. Okay, so those are some words. Now, does anybody have any questions so far? We're almost at the end. Wanted to talk a little bit about the pronunciation, because I think that's another thing that intimidates people. Latin is actually really easy to pronounce, unlike a language like English. It doesn't have any silent letters, so you're not going to come upon a word like, that has like the K and knife, H and ghost. You pronounce every letter. Think about how you pronounce the word that is spelled A-N-E-M-O-N-E. When you first saw that word, being an English speaker, you might have thought it was anemone, but you know that is anemone. It's just like that. Just pronounce the letters like that. And keep in mind, it's a dead language. Nobody's going to correct you. I mean, it's like Julius Caesar is going to come back from the dead and say, that's not how you say that. So, give it a try. You're not going to be that far off if you just pronounce all the letters. Let's see. There are tons of sites out there that will help you with pronunciation, as well as, which is actually, this is the more important one, the etymologies. Most good dictionaries will give you the etymology if you just put in the scientific term. It's going to tell you that the word comes from the Latin word for grape, and it's going to tell you that, whatever. So I don't expect that you would be able to just look at the Latin and know what it says. I don't know that often. I have to look them up often. But once you find out what it is and you form a picture of that in your head, it really helps you remember in detail about that plant. And that's really the reason that it's useful to find out. So lots of sites for etymologies. If your dictionary doesn't tell you, you can just Google, put the name in and say etymology. A bunch of sites are going to come up. Same is true of pronunciation. You just put the word in and say, how do I pronounce, or pronunciation. And you're going to get several examples of how to pronounce something. And hopefully they'll match. Sometimes they don't, but that just shows you that you're not, just give it a try. Okay, I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions? I assured Nancy no Latin test.
The Beach Brothers are a mushroom expert. On a rare occasion, I go out with them. Everything is Latin. And I asked them, well, why? Give me the common name. They said, well, for a lot of mushrooms, there is no common name.
Yeah.
So they said we started with the Latin because the common names don't work.
Right. Yeah, and common names can also, well, you can forget them easily if they don't really give you much information, or they can be really similar to another common name. It's in a business like theirs, you'd have to know what the Latin is. Yes.
So that's certainly true of fungi, but it's also true of many insects. I mean, some of them have common names, but a lot of them don't.
Right. Yeah. So how do you remember them? Well, let's see. I don't think you're going to want to do this, but this is what I do. I keep a little list of my Latin words. And I have the English on one side and the Latin on the other, and I review them every once in a while. And it's just, I'm just a word nerd. What can I say? I'm not expecting you're going to want to do that, but it is useful to take the time when you're going to learn a new plant to just say, oh, what does that Latin say? And it's not hard to find it online. And I will tell you, it's going to deepen your understanding of the plant. Anyone else?
Thank you, Pam. That was excellent. And I want to say that I really like how you tied in with what Kevin was saying. Pam was supposed to go first, but I think it worked out better that you went second. And also a bit of a word nerd, not as much of a word nerd as she is, but I used to teach word cells, which is the same thing, when I was teaching middle school students. And I have some of my cards still. So
There you go.
yeah, that's exciting.